Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the epic 500-year history of the Abbasid Caliphate. We're going to unpack exactly how one of the world's absolute greatest empires was born out of a massive rebellion, how it sparked an unprecedented global age of knowledge, and how, ultimately, a series of fatal shifts in their military power led them to completely destroy themselves. But before we jump into the incredible technological and cultural innovations of this era, we really have to look at the big picture and ask ourselves a pretty dark question. How does a cosmopolitan empire that thrived for half a millennium end up completely erased by a terrifying invasion? To figure that out, we have to trace the threat from their absolute peak of power all the way back to their origins.
Part 1. The Spark. The Black Banner's Rise.
Empires are rarely born peacefully, right? And the Islamic Caliphate was absolutely no exception. To understand the violent, catastrophic end of the Abbasids, we first have to go back to the 8th century to witness their incredibly bloody beginning. The ruling Umayyad Caliphate, flying their white banners, was basically dominated by a really small Arab elite. They treated non-Muslims and even non-Arab Muslim converts as second-class citizens. Well, the Abbasids saw this boiling discontent and they leveraged it perfectly. Raising their black banners, they built this massive diverse coalition of Arabs, Persians, and Central Asians, promising everyone a return to true, inclusive moral leadership.
That massive coalition finally clashed with the Umayyad forces in 750 AD. Led by a brilliant commander named Abu Muslim, who operated out of the frontier region of Khorasan, the Abbasid Black Banners utterly crushed the Umayyad cavalry at the Battle of the Zab River. The Umayyad ruler actually launched a completely reckless head-on charge right into the Abbasid spear walls, and it ended in total disaster. The Abbasids then hunted down the surviving members of the ruling family and officially established a brand new dynasty.
Part 2. The Zenith. Islam's Golden Age. With their rivals eliminated and their power totally consolidated, the Abbasids transitioned from decades of bloodshed into this era of astonishing city building and an absolute intellectual explosion. In 762 AD, Caliph al-Mansur ordered the construction of a brand new capital on the Tigris River, Baghdad, the city of peace. Under later rulers like Caliph Harun al-Rashid, Baghdad quickly became the beating heart of the medieval world. It was positioned perfectly astride the ancient Silk Roads, which funneled just immense wealth, silk, spices, and even thoroughbred horses straight into the empire. The court was incredibly cosmopolitan. They adopted Persian culture and bureaucracy, run by families like the Barmakids, and fostered an environment where religion and philosophy were just openly debated.
During this zenith, an intellectual movement of massive scale took place. The Abbasids set up the famous House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Scholars there were tasked with translating mountains of classical texts from Greek, Middle Persian, and Sanskrit into Arabic. By doing this, the Abbasids practically saved humanity's collective knowledge, including the works of Greek heavyweights like Aristotle and Galen, from being completely lost to history forever.
Now, here's what's really wild, and it shows how directly this ancient golden age impacts your exact life today. The 9th century Abbasid scholar al-Khwarizmi made such massive contributions to mathematics that he is literally dubbed the father of algebra. Plus, the Latinized version of his name, algorithmi, is the direct origin of our word algorithm. Every single time you use a computer, search the internet, or just scroll on your smartphone, you are relying on a foundational concept named after an Abbasid genius.
Of course, all of this new information had to be recorded somewhere. Thanks to the Silk Road, Chinese paper-making techniques reached the Abbasids, and they went all in. Paper was way cheaper and much more abundant than traditional parchment or papyrus. This totally revolutionized their administration, their education system, and their bookmaking, basically transforming medieval Islam into one of the most hyper-bookish cultures the world had ever seen.
Part 3. The Sword, the Military Revolution. But look, an empire of this massive scale couldn't survive on books and philosophy alone. It required devastating, highly organized military power to maintain its borders against constant external threats like the Byzantine Empire. The early Abbasid armies were an incredibly versatile and loyal mix of troops. They relied heavily on Khorasani frontiersmen, who were elite infantry and heavy armored cavalry, kind of similar to European knights. They also used expert skirmishers from the Persian highlands and heavily armed African troops who fought with shields and spears. And they were absolute masters of advanced siege warfare, using catapults, battering rams, and these terrifying petroleum-based fire weapons called nafta to take down fortified cities.
However, in the 9th century, Caliph al-Mu'tasim made a fatal shift in military strategy.
Instead of relying on those traditional, loyal frontiersmen, he started purchasing young Turkish slave soldiers, known as Mamluks, raising them to be an elite corps of mounted archers loyal only to him. But this backfired catastrophically. These Turkish generals gained immense political power at court, completely alienating the old nobility. In 861 AD, the caliph's own Turkish bodyguards assassinated Caliph al-Mutawakkil. He had inadvertently handed over the keys to the kingdom straight to the military.
That one military blunder basically destroyed centuries of tradition and plunged the empire into a chaotic period known as the Decade of Anarchy. During this time, 4 successive caliphs took power, and every single one of them was violently overthrown by the Turkish military elite. These so-called leaders of the Islamic world became nothing more than disposable puppets for their own generals.
Part 4. The collapse. The empire fractures. Once the illusion of the caliph's supreme authority was shattered, the center just could not hold. The vast, diverse Abbasid territory began to rapidly rip itself apart as local leaders saw their opportunity and regional authority totally crumbled. The fertile province of Egypt was lost to the Umayyads dynasty. Southern Iraq was devastated by a massive 14-year slave rebellion known as the Zanj Uprising, which basically crippled the capital's food supply and tax revenue. Down in Arabia, Shiite groups like the Qarmadians actually attacked pilgrims and literally stole the black stone from Mecca. The final humiliation came in 945 AD, when the Umayyads, a group of Shiite warlords from Persia, marched right into Baghdad and seized control. The reality of this era is captured perfectly in just one phrase: the caliph reigns, but does not rule. By the mid-10th century, the Abbasid Caliph had been reduced to a mere figurehead. He sat quietly in Baghdad as a spiritual symbol, stripped of all political and military power, while powerful foreign dynasties like the Umayyads and later the mighty Seljuk Turks commanded the actual armies and ran the empire.
Part 5. The Fall of Baghdad. Despite a brief, spirited resurgence of independence in the 12th century when Abbasid caliphs actually managed to field an army again, their fate was pretty much sealed. An apocalyptic force was riding out of the east. In the 13th century, the Mongols swept through the Islamic world. By 1256, Genghis Khan's grandson Hulagu Khan had completely crushed the legendary Order of Assassins. By 1258, his massive army arrived at the gates of Baghdad and demanded surrender. Caliph al-Mu'tasim, tragically and very arrogantly, believed his city's walls and historical prestige would protect them. He refused to submit, launched a disastrous military counterattack that was instantly massacred, and was ultimately forced to surrender his legendary city to the hordes.
The consequences of this arrogance were just horrific. The Mongol destruction of Baghdad was absolute and merciless. According to contemporary chroniclers, the population was subjected to 40 days of systematic killing, pillaging, and enslavement. Tens of thousands of people were slaughtered. The dead literally lay like mounds in the streets and markets. Centuries of breathtaking architectural and cultural achievements were reduced to smoldering ash in just over a month. The cultural devastation here was utterly tragic. Baghdad's legendary libraries, including that incredible House of Wisdom, were just emptied out. The Mongols threw countless irreplaceable manuscripts and books directly into the Tigris River. It was famously said that the river ran black with the ink of human history's greatest scholars and red with their blood. So you see, this wasn't just a brutal military defeat. It was the catastrophic obliteration of the intellectual capital of the entire world. And then came the final humiliation for the Abbasid rulers. Caliph al-Mu'tasim was forced to literally stand by and watch his magnificent city burn to the ground. Now, because Mongols' superstition warned against spilling royal blood directly into the earth, they devised a uniquely brutal execution. The last true caliph of Baghdad was tightly rolled into a carpet and trampled to death by the hooves of Mongol horses, crushed beneath the weight of his own conquerors. Now, a powerless, entirely ceremonial line of Abbasid shadow caliphs did manage to survive in Egypt for a few more centuries under Mamluk protection, but the story effectively ended there. In 1517 AD, the last of these ceremonial figures surrendered his title to the rising Ottoman Empire in Constantinople. The grand political, military, and cultural might of the Abbasids was gone forever. Which brings us to the end of our explainer and leaves us with a pretty chilling realization to ponder. The Abbasids saved human history, they pioneered global trade, and birthed the technology we use every single day. Yet, a shift in military policy and one arrogant miscalculation saw all of it trampled into dust. So, no matter how advanced our technology gets or how cosmopolitan our modern society feels, the legacy of the Abbasid Caliphate stands as a stark warning. If an empire this brilliant can vanish in the blink of an eye, how fragile is our own era of progress?